Another critical component to exam success is managing your emotion on the exam. The clock is ticking. You or your company have paid a lot of money for you to take this exam. That can lead to some nerves. How do we handle the nervousness that comes up during the exam? And this doesn't impact everyone, but depending on the exam, I certainly experience that from time to time. And there's another CCA that I know very well, and he tells me that he experiences nervousness on the exam. How do we handle that? Here's something that I've tried, and it works. It's something I learned from the Winter Olympics. Do you remember Apollo Ono? He was a short track speed skater for the United States. And I'm watching him on TV, and before he races, he's out there skating around, warming up, and he's yawning. And I'm wondering, is he sleepy? Is he bored? He's in the Olympics. Why is he yawning? But then I heard one of the commentators explain what was going on. He uses that as a strategy to control nervousness. By yawning when you get nervous, it forces your body to calm down a little bit. You might try it sometime. I found it to work pretty well. And we also have to have the right mindset when we go into an exam. I know one of the students in the CCA boot camp that I took last year, he referred to his first attempt at a CCA lab exam as an investigative attempt. I love that. An investigative attempt. In other words, he goes in there without a lot of pressure on him. He goes in there with the goal of just investigating what's it like on the CCA lab. What sort of topics might you be challenged with? What does the equipment look like? How does everything work? He goes in there with the goal of not necessarily passing, that would be a nice bonus, but he goes in there with the goal of investigating what's on the exam. And you might want to adopt this mindset when you're taking an exam. Certainly, I'm not suggesting that you should fall short in your preparation and think you're just going to go in there to see what's on the exam. I recommend thoroughly preparing before even your first attempt. But when you go take that first attempt, if it's a lab or a really high-end or really tough exam, you might have the mindset that you've prepared, given the right set of questions. It's possible that you're going to pass, but you're going to go investigate what's on the exam. You're committed to eventually passing this test, and you might do it right now based on your preparation, but your goal is to investigate what's on the exam. Something else that exam candidates often struggle with is whether or not they should skip a question on the exam or just make a guess and move on. Certainly, as you're going through most of Cisco's certification exams, some questions are going to be much tougher than others. You might have sims. You might have a huge amount of output that you have to read through to determine what's going on in a configuration. Some questions take longer than other questions. And if this is one of those exams where time is a big consideration, sometimes it makes sense to skip a question or to make your best guess. I was taking an exam, and it might be retired by the time you hear this recording. I won't name the exam, but I was taking an exam, and there was this huge amount of debug output on the screen. So much so, in fact, that there was a search mechanism built into the question where you could search for specific strings. It would have taken me a very long time to determine what was going on in all that debug output. And I could tell that, and I decided that I think I'm doing well enough on the other questions to still pass and not burn 10 to 15 minutes on this one question. And I skipped it. Well, I say I skipped it. I made my best guess based on the wording of the question. I made a very educated guess, but I didn't actually find the solution in the debug output. I just made a good guess and moved on because I was confident about how I was doing on the other questions. For time reasons, sometimes you might want to skip a question if you're confident in your ability to still pass based on the other questions. I've got a very good friend who's a CCIE. In fact, he teaches CCIE preparation courses, and he went to take the CCNA exam not too long ago. I guess just to see what was on it these days. Maybe he was doing a boot camp or something. But anyway, he was taking the CCNA exam, and when he came up on the subnetting questions, he decided to skip those because it would take a while to do all the math. And he wasn't really going after his CCNA. He was obviously already highly credentialed, but he was able to pass the test even skipping the subnetting questions. I don't recommend you do this. I do not recommend skipping subnet questions on the CCNA exam. That could kill your score. But because he knew everything else, and he saw that these were very time-consuming questions, he decided to skip. So sometimes it's better to skip a question so that you have time to answer other questions rather than burning 10 to 15 minutes on one question. What you might want to do is determine, and this is what I do, determine how many questions are on the exam. It tells you at the beginning, and divide the amount of time you're given by the number of questions. This gives you a rough idea of how many minutes to spend on each question. Let's say you're given 2 hours to complete the exam. Here's what I'll do. I'll periodically check the clock to make sure I'm on pace. For example, at an hour, halfway through, I check. Have I answered half the questions yet? If not, I need to speed up. I might need to skip a question at that point. But if I have answered more than half of the questions, and half my time is gone, then I'm on a great pace. No need to skip questions now. I'll just keep plowing through at this rate. Let's sum up what we've said in this discussion revolving around the psychology of certification. We talked about the criticality of goal setting, setting long-range goals, setting short-range goals, celebrating small accomplishments, coming up with the why. Why do you want to achieve this goal? We talked about various study strategies, how you can get access to equipment, how you can collaborate with your peers online, how you can gather information from Cisco's website, and we talked about different tracks of books available from Cisco Press. When you're studying, we talked about time management, allocating blocks of time for your study, and identifying what specific topics you're going to be studying on specific days of the week. And we wrapped things up by discussing how to manage emotion on the exam. What do you do when the nerves show up on the exam and you start to panic a bit? How do you go in with the right mindset so that you don't overwhelm yourself with pressure that you must pass the exam? Maybe you look at this attempt as an investigative attempt. And if you are running short on time, we discussed when and if it makes sense to maybe even skip a question. Well, I certainly hope this discussion on the psychology of certification has served you in some way. I hope it's going to help you in your career and in your certification pursuits. I wish you all the best. I hope you'll follow me online at Kevin Wallace Networking on Facebook. You can become a fan of that page. You can follow K Wallace CCIE on Twitter. And you can subscribe to the One Exam a Month podcast on iTunes. I hope to see you there.